What's up, guys? Today I'm going to get into some detail explaining the JM press, comparing it to a couple other exercises, and going over the specific version that I tend to use, at least right now. Right before I do all that, go ahead and do some of that YouTube stuff for me, help this channel grow. Like, subscribe, share with some friends, all that good stuff. Or wait and see. Wait and see the content. If you approve it, then maybe thumbs up at the end, then maybe share, then maybe sub. I'll give you a pass till the end. That's cool too. So for anybody new here, I've been doing some form of JM press on and off since Mr. J.M. Blakely invented these, whenever the hell that was, before I was born maybe, I don't know. But honestly, I've been doing this for a while, and recently over the past couple of years, I've been doing a Smith machine variation. And again, towards the end of the video, I'll get a little bit more detail of why the Smith machine, it's not super complicated. Why do I sometimes band it? But I've had a lot of questions about why do you bring it to the shoulder? Why don't you bring it to the forehead? What happens if you bring it to the chin? Da, da, da. And so really, as you move hand positions, so hopefully you can see from my sweet drawing here, per the usual, I get so many requests for my drawings. Yes, I do request, I think I do like $12,000 per dry erase board. But if you want me to do something for you, what is that? I'll commission a dry erase board art for you. So $12,000, I'll draw whatever you want, stick figures only, and then I'll mail you the entire dry erase board. But anyway, no one's requested that. My mom hasn't requested that. She thinks they're ugly. But anyway, I've got the smiley face man down here because if you're doing JM presses, you're happy. If you're doing something else, you're going to frown. But for right now, we're happy. So I'm going to use this guy basically to compare the different versions. And like I was starting to show here, basically as you move from here, this is the Cliff Notes version for some of this. As your hand moves up and up and up this way, you move from JM press basically into just some sort of skull crest variation. As your hand starts to move this way, you move from JM press more into just what you would consider maybe a close grip press. So that's really where I'm going to get into the nitty gritty here. The couple things that I want to compare, first and foremost, is loading as far as torque is concerned. So I'm going to link up here somewhere. I'm not going to do it. Trevor's going to do it for me because I barely know how to operate my iPhone. But we're going to have a link up here. I did a video at some point in time on torque, moment arms, force, all that good stuff. Again, that sounds kind of nerdy. I'm not trying to flex my brain because there's nothing there to flex. But the reality is, if you want to understand just a little bit more what your muscles do, they don't move weight. They don't even move or tolerate just weight. What they do is they manage torque around joints. Torque is made up of load and this moment arm thing. So if you want a little bit better understanding of that, and some of this doesn't make sense, watch that video that was already linked a while back. But that's what I'm going to talk about, is what positions create the most torque at what joints. How is that basically different from variation to variation? And then we'll also talk a little bit about range of motion trained, because there's a big difference here as far as what range of motion, as far as the triceps are concerned, is trained here as well too. So this is the JM press. I'm going to draw some lines. So assuming that you're using something that's gravity based. So if I'm doing this on the Smith machine, or with the two most common things, basically be a Smith machine with a bar, or just basically an easy, you could do an easy curl bar or a straight bar, whatever it is. But the line of force is straight down ish. So again, obviously gravity, not ish, it's straight down. I don't think there's ever a time there's an ish. If there was an ish, you'd fall sideways randomly at various points in time. So this is the line of force. Wherever basically, in this case, when we're talking gravity, the horizontal distance between that line of force and pretty much any joint in the body, we can have an idea of what amount of torque is it creating at that joint. And so again, that moment arm thing, we can look at here to the elbow, is again, it's always going to be a 90-degree angle, which is the same thing as the closest distance. I'll just draw this solid. So the blue line is the moment arm deal, 90-degree angle. And so we can see basically this moment arm at this point in time for the JM press is very far away from the elbow. So you would take the amount of load that you have, you would multiply it by that moment arm thing, and you could find out the amount of elbow torque. Again, the exact numbers aren't really important, not very practical for gym purposes. You just have to know, is it bigger or is it smaller type deal. So what you'll see here is if I also draw this line of force basically straight through the shoulder joint. So again, these little dots are my joints. Let me clarify that. Or I guess this one's not a joint. The top one's a hand. So again, very technical stuff here. Hand, shoulder joint, elbow joint. So we're looking at these joints. So the load's in the hand. This line of force is very far away from the elbow joint, large moment arm, large amount of torque. This line of force pretty much passes right through the shoulder joint. So if it's passing right through the shoulder joint, pretty much the moment arm is either extremely small or basically non-existent, which means it imparts little to no torque on the shoulder joint. Now, obviously there's a component of stability there. If you're on a Smith machine, you're actually creating kind of a closed chain thing, which makes things a little bit different. But it's very safe to say that this creates a lot of work for the triceps, which manage the elbow joint, a lot of torque around the elbow, and little to no torque around the shoulder. So again, if this JM press is the goal is to train triceps, it's fair to say it creates way more torque around the elbow and will ultimately demand more from the triceps, and way less torque around the shoulder joint and involve much less stuff from the shoulder is there as well too. So going to be much less front delt. There's going to be much less pec, much less whatever. So one, that is the main merit, I would say, over a close grip press. The merit of this over close grip press is how much tricep is involved and how little shoulder is involved. And I want you to take a note here as well too. So again, we're going to find something similar with the tricep extension, the skull crusher, but look at the range of motion that's trained here. So I'm going to use the same color to make things confusing, but this is basically full elbow flexion. So how far can you flex your elbow? This is the end of the range of this joint. So again, maybe minus the long head. This is going to be, let's just say, forget about the long head for a second, but for most of your tricep heads, and the long head is going to be very lengthened here. So we're going to train a length of the tricep here that you're really not able to get with a close grip press or a skull crush. So that's the main thing we'll show here as far as torque is concerned. Now I'm going to erase everything and make it all ugly, minus maybe the smiley face. So that's the JM press. Let's take a look at a close grip press. So again, obviously we're all looking from the side here. Hopefully that makes sense-ish. Here's your close grip press here. So close grip press, imagine my arm's getting a little bit past my side. Here's the elbow joint. And depending on how you do this, this could change things. So if your close grip press is here, so this could be your close grip press, and I'll do two quick different ones on this one. What could happen, a lot of people do close grip press and they say, I don't really feel my triceps a whole lot. Well, if you're doing it where your hand is stacked directly above your elbow, that's the reason. So again, we've got this line of force thing straight down. And let's take a look at this moment arm thing to figure out how much it's creating torque around joints and ultimately demanding of the muscles that manage those joints. If we look at the elbow here, this is straight down, it's pretty much passing through the elbow joint. So what does that mean? The moment arm is either non-existent or very small. So this close grip press, that load is creating very little torque around the elbow joint. Again, it's never quite zero, even if it's actually lined up right through the center of the joint, just because there's obviously stuff involved in managing that joint. There's a coordination component. The triceps involved actually keeping it stacked and keeping the joint from disassembling. But as far as training purposes are concerned, it's very little stimulus, very little torque. If we do that moment arm thing again to the shoulder joint, so look, it's going to be a 90-degree angle where they're closest, which is basically right along the line of our imaginary bench here. All we have to know is that this is long. So this type of close grip press creates a large moment arm to the shoulder joint, which creates a lot of torque there. So this close grip press is going to demand a lot more out of the shoulder and the stuff that's around the shoulder, so front delts, pecs, maybe depending on your arm path, and much less out of the triceps. Now to erase things and make things ugly again. At some point in time, this is going to be too ugly, which I apologize. But if you're ever not liking the way things are looking, you don't like the quality of the video, remember my motto, you get what you pay for. So shut up. Just kidding. So you could close grip press this variation. Someone's going to say, well, what if I bring it up a little bit higher on my chest, which is the way that I would probably recommend close grip pressing, would be a little bit more like this path. And so this is a nice, more even close grip press. So if your goal was just pure output, maybe you're a power lifter, an athlete, and you just want to move as much weight as possible with this pattern, we do that line of force thing again, straight down, and we're going to do moment arms to the joints. So here is the moment arm to the elbow. Got to erase this one to make this one not super confusing, but there we go. This is the moment arm, 90 degrees to the shoulder joint. So imagine you can't see any of that blue there. Again, remember my motto, don't complain, or complain to your mom, not me. So this one we look at just by, instead of bringing it stacked, bringing it a little bit higher, now we have basically almost split 50-50. So this load is now imparting that amount of load times this moment arm times this moment arm. They're pretty equal in length, which is going to mean that basically this is creating almost equal demand from the triceps and from the front delt. So those are a couple different variations there. But either way, for a given load, basically the moment arms are always going to be shorter compared to doing the JM press. So one way or another, again, especially if you're doing it this way, it's almost a shoulder exercise. And even this way, it's more of a tricep exercise, but still very much so, if almost just as much a front delt exercise. Again, none of that is bad, but that's comparing for a given weight. You can create way more torque, all other things being the same for a given weight, with the JM press at the elbow joint compared to a close grip press. Now let me erase as much of this mess as I can. And let's lastly look at the skull crusher. Again, even with that variation before it's completely gone, look at the range of motion here. So again, if this was my joint before I erased it, here we go. Look at the elbow joint here. So if you compare back to that first one, there's not quite training full elbow flexion. So this is maybe training there. So we're still with this exercise, we're not actually able to train that muscle length that we get with the JM press. So even compared to a close grip press, you are still unable to train that given muscle length. So now we look at the skull crusher. So we've got a skull crusher, and we put this here, and we bring the weight down to your skull to be crushed. And let's draw stuff here. So we've got the line of force. Now again, remember, we're looking at that line of force, which is a direction relative to a joint. So draw it all the way through. Yes, it's coming from the weight, but when we're looking, it's that line of force always to the joint. So we look here. Oh, wait, I don't want to mix up my colors, make things even more confusing. We look here. And what do we have with a skull crusher? So we will see a pretty darn long moment arm, which means for a given weight, we are creating a good amount of torque at that elbow joint and creating pretty large amounts of demand. So you could have a very similar length depending on where you stop. So even if you stop with your forearm like right above your head, that's actually the point where there's going to be the most torque, the longest moment arm, but basically it's going to be always the length of your forearm. So for a given weight, technically you could create a position where you're creating just as much torque at the elbow joint as you are doing basically with the JM press. But there's a couple other considerations here as well. So one, the first thing I wanted to show is this range of motion. I don't know which one to show for this, but again, we are short of full elbow flexion. So even with a skull crusher, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but you can't train a fully lengthened tricep. The other thing is this line of force still has influence. The blue one, right through my face, still has influence at the shoulder joint. Is this taxing the front delt? No, it's actually doing the opposite. So your front delt will create shoulder flexion, and this load on this side of the shoulder joint is actually pulling you into shoulder flexion. So it's actually assisting your front delt. So you actually have to use stuff on the other side of the joint. What are your shoulder extensors? Well, in this position, it's going to be stuff like lats, could also be teres, some rear delts, stuff like that. So this still creates influence at the shoulder joint, but now it's the opposite side of the joint, creating in the opposite direction. So again, it's still safe to say doing a skull crusher is going to have more influence on your shoulder joint, but actually more stuff on the other side to actually do work and to stabilize. So hopefully that makes sense. And then I've said this in videos before, alignment becomes a bigger issue. So again, with skull crushers, that's a completely separate video, but maybe look back a couple of my videos, I've compared skull crushers to cables. The other reason that skull crushers are a little bit tough for some people, at least with a fixed bar, is they don't line up great with the joints. So that's one of the main reasons that I prefer the JM press as well too, is one, I think most pressing stuff is easier to line up from a joint standpoint, so a little healthier or safer on the joints. So that's one little check for the JM press over the skull crusher. But then two, it also, even though they can create similar amounts of torque, it also trains a muscle length that you can't train otherwise with a skull crusher or with a close grip press. And the last thing I'm going to demonstrate, so hopefully that's really kind of comparing all of those. I would say every single exercise has merit. They all do something slightly different. But again, from pure tricep output, that is why I like the JM press so much, is because the amount of influence, one, at the tricep, or excuse me, at the elbow, and in turn from the tricep, the little amount of influence it has over the shoulder joint, and the fact that it's one of the only tricep exercises, not the only, one of the only that trains a tricep in full elbow flexion. The last thing here is, let's say we go to a JM press. So this is one, why do I like to do it on a Smith often? Should be pretty clear that it's just a little less to stabilize. And maybe I'll really nerd on this last one here to show something as a bonus. But so one, why do I like the Smith? Mainly just to stabilize. I'll go one little asterisk, one more nerd on that towards the end. But also, why do I use bands? So again, understanding that moment arm thing, as you go from the bottom to the top of any of these exercises that I've just demonstrated, you go from a position from a very long moment arm to pretty much a non-existence or no moment arm. So if I go from here, I'm going to draw both just to make stuff confusing. So here, I'll just do it with the JM press. So I think that was somewhere down at the side, somewhere up here. So here's the bottom position. Here is the top position. So again, this is basically just demonstrating the range of motion here. So hopefully that makes sense. So here's me in the bottom. What do I have here? We have the line of force, which basically stays in the exact same plane the whole time, especially if you're using a Smith machine. So here's the line of force. So again, this is the same thing you get with any type of pressing motion, really, especially where it goes from far away from the train joint to right over top the train joint, is you get a long moment arm at the bottom. And then when you're stacked at the top, you can see it is stacked. I'm sure you've heard people talk about that. There is basically little to no moment arm. So even though the load in my hand, let's say it's 100 pounds, That 100 pounds times this moment arm at the bottom is going to be 100 times, let's say we do 2 feet, so it's going to be 200 foot-pounds of torque. We go to the top with that 100 pounds, and there's no moment arm. There's basically little to no torque at the elbow joint. So we go from a lot of work to literally you could pretty much hold this all day, minus it just kind of smushing you back and stacking into the joint. So what do we do? And realize there's spaces in between. Let's see if I can draw this and make this as confusing as possible. But basically, as we come up here, we've got somewhere in between as well too. This is halfway up. And what happens here, that moment arm shrinks as we go up. So it's safe to say at the bottom of a JM press, as that moment arm gets smaller, again, we don't have to do the actual math, but elbow torque goes from same weight times this long number to same weight times a smaller number. You get less and less torque as you go up. So if we're getting less and less torque as we go up and your muscle's still at a length where it's basically relatively the same strength, what can we do to offset that? Well, the moment arm shrinking if you're going to do the movement no matter what, but if what we want to keep more consistent is torque, we can change the weight. So when I'm at the bottom, you'll see when I'm doing these often, the bands are completely slack. So on these ones, it's just convenient. You could do the same thing banding from the top, but it's easier setup from banding from the bottom. So I'm at the bottom, the bands are completely slack. I've got, hypothetically speaking, 100 pounds on the bar. And as I come up, the bands get tighter and tighter and tighter. So basically I'm changing from my hands 100 pounds to 120 pounds, 150 pounds, whatever. So again, as those moment arms shrink, the load gets heavier. And again, because I'm multiplying those two things together, right here at the bottom, the torque here and the torque here, because the load is getting heavier, might be the same or very similar. I could do math to figure it out. So again, this is the same thing why bands and chains make a lot of sense for close grip press as well too. They make a lot of sense for squat patterns because this happens from the bottom of a squat to the top of the squat, the bottom of a press to the top of the press. Joints stack, moment arms shrink, and overall torque decreases unless you offset it by changing the load. So that's a little extra nerd bonus for you there as far as why am I using the band stuff. And the last super nerd thing that I'll do just to make everyone's head hurt is what's one other reason that I like the Smith machine. Let's just erase all of this. So let's get back to that stack position. This is your last bonus nerd. If you don't like nerd stuff, check out right now. Go watch someone else because you will not enjoy this. If you like nerd stuff, you're really going to enjoy this. So here I am on a Smith machine, just minding my business, remembering that I watched a hypertrophy coach video that says as things stack and stuff comes to the top, torque goes to zero. So here's me just doing especially a free weight or a Smith machine where I'm just pressing straight up into the bar in direct opposition of the load. And that line of force basically goes exactly as I said. So here's the line of force. But what happens hypothetically if as I come to the top, instead of just pushing straight up, I actually push. So imagine I'm lying on a Smith machine as I come to the top. I push this way a little bit in the bar. I've got my hands on it like this. And instead of straight up, I push this way a little bit as I go. So I push this way just a little bit. And so now we've got two different lines of force going right through my hands. So again, if I push into the bar and the bar doesn't move that way, the bar is pushing the same amount of force back into my hands. That's how that kind of stuff works. So now I basically have two different lines of force going through the hand. So what happens with two different lines of force? We get what we call a resultant. And so now the new line of force, instead of being straight up and down, so you just combine these two, so straight up and down direction with a little bit of this direction, so it's really the magnitude of this matters, the new line of force is going to look something like this. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, then you can look up stuff about resultants and magnitude of forces and all that kind of stuff. And what has happened, look what we have here. We have a moment arm now from going from zero to a small moment arm to your elbow. Why does anyone care about this? You may or may not. Because now I'm in this top position, and even though that load is stacked, the line of force is no longer stacked. So it's an easy way to keep the exercise from going to complete zero at the top, zero torque at the elbow joint, zero tension through the triceps, to if I just finish and I press this way a little bit into the bar, I can actually change the direction of that line of force. It's no longer just gravity because I have that fixed bar path, and I can change the direction of the line of force and actually create a little bit of a moment arm and make sure I still have a little bit of demand at the top. Is that a night and day massive difference? No, but if you do it, it makes it suck a little bit more, and a little bit more suck is a good thing if you're trying to build muscle. Write that down. But anyway, that is that. So hopefully that makes sense. Comparing my short recap on all of these is the advantage aside from alignment. Again, skull crushes are a little bit tough for elbow alignment. The JM press is going to have the most torque at the elbow joint, accompanied by the least torque at the shoulder joint. Close grip press will be the next. We'll have the most demands from the shoulder joint, especially the front delt and things like that, while still either having no demand if you're stacked or a little demand if you're going a little bit higher than where that's, somewhere in between, basically the hand between your elbow and your shoulder. And the skull crusher will have, again, a large moment arm, can create a lot of torque at the elbow joint, but also still has some demands at the shoulder joint just from muscles on the opposite side. So we went nerd deep today. I warned you. Maybe I didn't warn you enough. I don't really know. But hopefully you found that interesting, enlightening, stimulating perhaps. And if you enjoyed, hit that thumbs up. Give me a little subscribe. Share with some friends. If you didn't enjoy it, you can unthumbs up. Is there an unthumbs up button? I hope there isn't. But if there is, you can do it. I won't be mad. So enjoy the stick figures. Hit me up in my email or my DM or my comments if you want me to commission you a dry erase work, because I will do that. And until the next one, guys, enjoy.